Let me first say thank you to Chris and Catherine at the Elaine de Kooning House for first for hosting Lonnie these last few weeks, next week, to be in the studio and in the house, making art and relaxing. It's a rare treat, certainly, for Lonnie to have this much of a break in his schedule, mostly obviously due to COVID, to be able to come up and spend time up in this beautiful part of the world. And also to Guildhall for hosting the streaming of this event. And I have the great pleasure of introducing two people who are, my name is Matt Arnett, and I have known and worked with Lonnie for the last 30 plus years, and maybe more about that later. And it's a great pleasure for me to be able to introduce Lonnie and Virginia. I'll start with Virginia, who we're lucky to have with us. Virginia is the Gracie Award winning host, former host of Word of Mouth for many years at New Hampshire Public Radio, and the host of Writers on a New England Stage, and the co-creator and host of the Apple, Apple, high up on the Apple podcast, Civics 101, which in these times has proved to be a very timely podcast, and now is the host of On Second Thought at Georgia Public Broadcasting. And she has agreed to serve as a kind of foil for Lonnie to maybe talk and ask him some questions this evening, and maybe spur some memories that will lead to music. Lonnie Holley has been making art all of his life, but it was in 1979, after the death of a niece and a nephew in a house fire, and his family, his sister, didn't have the money to buy tombstones, and after losing two children, she was despondent, and then when she realized she didn't have enough money to pay for tombstones, sank into a deep despair, and Lonnie wanted to do something to lift his sister's spirits, and he found an industrial cast-off material from the steel industry, and he carved sandstones for Maurice and Frida, his niece and nephew, and gave them to his sister, and when he did, immediately her spirits lifted at having tombstones, and it both made Lonnie understand the power of what he had been doing all of his life, and gave a real understanding to it, and the carving of the tombstones proved to be very cathartic, and from that moment until today, he has continued to make art out of whatever materials were available, many times cast off materials about, and his work is about the mistreatment of people of color, of women, our abuse of the environment, and guideposts, hopefully, for us to understand how better to work on the environment and make the world we live in a better place. Luckily for all of us, his work was discovered. I hate that word, but people found his art and what he was doing, and eventually that art made its way into museums around the country and around the world. What most people didn't realize, even the people who were the biggest fans of his visual art, is a few years after carving those tombstones, he found an old Casio keyboard at a Goodwill store in Birmingham and brought it home and took it apart and rewired it and tried to understand what made it make the sounds it made, fixed the ones that weren't working, and began punching out sounds on the keyboard and singing sometimes all day. and he would sing about the same things that his art was about. And many times he would be making art and stop making art and go and turn on the keyboard and pour out his feelings. And he started making home recordings of his singing. And I was very lucky in those days. Lonnie and I used to travel a lot, and he would get in the car and he'd say, "Oh, I got it here, pop this in the tape recorder." And he would put it in, and sometimes it would be a 90-minute tape, and it would just be one song that he would just be singing, and the tape would flip over, and he was still singing. And I would hope every time when it would come time to drop him off, he would forget that the tape was in the tape deck, and I would get to keep listening to it for a while. And luckily, in 2012, a small record label in Atlanta put out his first record, and it caught the attention of musicians first, and Lonnie started being invited to come and join artists like Daniel Lanois and Bill Callahan and Deer Hunter and many others to travel around the country and play music together and tour. And since 2012, he's toured the world. He's been on most of the continents and music festivals, and he's continued to put out records. His fourth record came out in July. His third record came out a few years ago and made the top records of the decade, the New Yorker's top records of the decade, and many other year-end lists, best records of the year. Anything I forgot? Did I say everything you wanted?
No, yes, just I was gone.
You were gone already. I think that's probably it. I don't know what else to say. Lonnie's continued to make art. He's continued to make music. He has a new record that comes out in March that he did with, he collaborated with a musician named Matthew E. White, a record that feels very, very timely. It's called Broken Mirror, a Selfie Reflection, and that'll be out in March. I think that's it. Let me give you over to Virginia Prescott and Lonnie Holley.
Hi, Lonnie.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Virginia.
Nice to see you here. Nice to
Yes.
have you all here. And a great, great pleasure to be at the Elaine de Kooning House. We have been here for almost 2 weeks. And when we came in here, this studio was absolutely empty. You can see that Lonnie has been working hard. He gets up early in the morning. He starts, there was one morning when Matt got up and thought, who's that guy outside? It was Lonnie out collecting wood. And that's kind of the way that he operates. He collects things and he makes them into art. And I'm wondering, Lonnie, your story, your origin story, born in Birmingham, Alabama, 1950, is so fascinating. And I know it's a long and complicated one, but I wonder if you want to tell the people here when you first started making art.
Well, I think probably from what I'm looking at myself do now compared to what I was doing when I was 4.5 years old. I was an artist at 4.5 years old, but we wasn't given the title artist when a kid stacked up something in a particular way and observed the water flowing or down the creek or the ditch. My thing, I was always an inspector. I did art to see the elements against it. I did things to see what would happen. I knew how to dig worms, so when I dug worms and I saw what the worms did to get away from the human, I tried to just see what it is that I could do to attract the worms. I also found out what the crawdad or crawfish would do. I used to build corrals around the crawfish just to see could he get out of what I did. So now the same thing that I did then. I do it now, but somebody call it art. Even though I don't have a problem with that, but the thing that I think that humans probably need to give other humans credit for doing is being that embedded your intelligence. I was embedding certain intelligence, certain skills that, what they say, practice makes perfect, Miss Virginia.
You were practicing. So when you were first called an artist, or when did you first call yourself that? We heard about the story.
In 1979, my sister had lost two of her children in a house fire. And I had my sister was crying and everybody in the family was crying. And I went over to another sister of mine because my mother had 27 children out of her 32 pregnancies.
So
27 live
you were one
children.
of 27 children.
Yes, I'm one of 27. Wow. And at the time, it was always 15 or 16 children around my mother's house. My mother also had the help of what they call in Alabama the Eastern Star Sisters, helped Mama raise the children by coming and taking some and keeping them overnight. They fed them, they brought Mama food. It was a whole lot of stuff. It was a lot of unity in the military families, because I'm a military child. My father was in the military, and my grandfather was in the military. And mostly all of my grandfather's friends was in the military. Where we lived was almost like a compound for the military people to live in, because it was right off from the airport. So the land around that was almost like National Guards. Or, you understand what I'm saying? So I started working the sandstone in the back of my grandfather's house after making the baby tombstones for my sister. Didn't know nothing about art. I knew that I had found something that made me feel real relaxed. Something that drawed me to it. Every day I lay down, I'm thinking about my next move, that's what I'm gonna do. So that's the reason I can't sleep. I can't lay down too long. I don't lay too long. I get up because I know that I got to finish fenced in. This is gonna be called fenced in. But I'm doing it in honor of all the quilts. And if you can look into that piece, you got diaper pins. You got pieces of quilt. I remember Mama and Momo, my grandmama, they used to tear up pieces of cloth to put diapers on us. They utilize everything. So when I started working the type of things that I started working on, I had a bunch of it, and nobody really didn't know what I was doing. Everybody thought I was gone stone crazy. You know, they say, he back in that yard, he just gone stone crazy, because I was working on some stone. And so this man came up, his name was Mr. Walter Mitchell, I'll never forget him. He was a Tuskegee Airman. Mm-hmm. He said, "You that Holley boy, ain't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You know what you're doing?" I said, "No, sir, I don't." He said, "I done been all around the world, and I done seen all kind of things." And he said, "You are the strangest one of your mama's children." You understand what I'm saying? And then he looked at what I was doing. He said, "That's art you're doing." I let that slip my mind because I didn't think about it. But one day I got real upset, and Aunt Sarah that lived up the street, Kelly. Her husband was also in World War One. Mr. Kelly had passed. Aunt Sarah was there. I used to get her wood and coal and stuff in. So Aunt Sarah called me up on the porch. She said, "What's the matter with you?" And I was crying. I said, I don't try to do everything I can, and I don't know what to do next. And she said, "All that work you got down there," she said, "you doing some wonderful stuff. I don't know too much about it, but my husband told me about what you're doing. He told me about that beautiful art that you're doing." She said, she tapped me on my cheek like that. She said, "Stop waiting on town to come to you and take your works to town." And I took my works to the Birmingham Museum of Art, to the back door, and knocked real hard. And the register came to the door and asked me what it is that I wanted. Did no soliciting. And I told him I had something to show. And then I showed her a couple of pieces, and she said, "Wait a minute." And she went in there and she got the director. His name was Mr. Richard Murray. Always gonna give him the credit. He was the director of the museum, but he had just came to Birmingham from the Smithsonian. Mm-hmm. I always equate things to the spirit that guides us through life. I don't know nothing about God. I don't know nothing about no angels and all that other kind of stuff. But I do know that we are involved in a spiritual manner. Otherwise, we would not be chosen to do what we are doing. And Mr. Murray asked me to come in the office. He said, "You got more of them?" And I had 150 pieces in the trunk of my car. And I took the 150 pieces inside, and he looked at them all. He said, "You did all of these?" He said, "You're a professional artist." I was listening at him because I didn't know what professional artists were. And then he looked at them, and he asked me what the title was with two pieces. One I had made Christ on the cross. I did the whole body. Well, on the way there, the body broke. And right in the pit where the feet was down at the pit of the cross, the other piece I had made the two natures of man. One nature of man was dealing with the dinosaurs in the pre-period, way back in ages and ages down the timeline. And then on the other hand, the sculpture, it was us dealing with a modern technical, all this airplanes and everything in the sky. And that head of the dinosaur broke, but it looked like a serpent's head. And I put the head into the pit. And Mr. Murray said, "Oh, I love that piece. What would you call that one?" And I'd say, "Serpent in the Pit of Christ." You understand what I'm saying?
I do. Well, it sounds like you're like your grandmother and your mother. You were using everything. You were using everything that was available.
I was using everything, but I was using it to make other people happy. I was using it to be an informationer to peoples about what we need to do. My grandmama wanted me to be a minister. Mm-hmm. I couldn't be a minister.
Why not?
I didn't like standing behind a pulpit. I didn't like the church. I don't like taking up people's time unnecessarily. What I want to do is I want to be the one to give you the seed. See, my art is a seed. Once you look at it, it plants. It's implanted in your brain, and it starts something to growing. I want to be able to say something to somebody and let that become a seed. May not even on fertilist itself until much later. But when you need it, what I said is going to start popping and growing. You see what I'm talking about?
I do.
It's almost like the paintings that you see, the works on the quilts, the pieces on here. You see a bunch of faces, crowds and crowds and crowds and crowds and crowds, and fanning and people trying to communicate and people looking after the child. The children is going to be the most important thing that we could ever imagine. Even the Y sculptures goes all the way down from the power Y. It comes down all the way down to the littlest face that's on there, but it's still a branch. If I'm not pruned right, I won't grow. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Even though I'm a branch, somebody need to take and look at me and see what it is or where I came from. If I'm a certain branch from certain trees, that's going to take you all the way back down to the seed that was planted into the earth that caused whatever that tree was. You see what I'm talking about?
I do, but I'm wondering how that also relates to your music, because this is another part of the way that you express yourself, which is a little bit more like a preacher. You're sitting there behind the keyboard. You are, asking for people's attention in a different way. So how does that work for you? Like, is that another way of planting a seed?
Excuse me. Again, I'm no more than this dresser draw here.
Let's talk about that dresser draw.
This is a dresser draw where everybody can see what I made this in. This dresser draw can be a casket for a small baby. It can be, when I turn it over, it can be a pen. If you took 3 of these dresser drawers and put them together, you can let your baby lay in there and raise that baby up in there. You can put a little fence around it. This one here, I had been down to El Paso, went over in the Juarez a couple of times. And I was going over there with a guy by the name of Mark Mainwell, and I'll never forget him. Wonderful person. He invited me down and another artist out of Alabama. We went down and he asked us, did we want to do a project? I was thinking about it, and I kind of told him, I don't know, because that was kind of far away for me to come to. Mm-hmm. So thinking about, can I make it there to do what he wanted me to do?
Right, because you live in Atlanta.
No, I was living in Birmingham
I
at the
see
time.
then.
So what happened to make my mind up that day, we went to Juarez. We went shopping. One of the little homeless children, she was a little girl, and she had some berries or some pine that comes off the pine tree.
Pine cones?
Pine cone. Mm-hmm. And she was giving them to me. She couldn't speak English. She's money for this, money for this. And she was begging. And I'm such a giver. And Mark said, come on, Lonnie, we gotta go. We gotta get back across the border before a certain time. So I was trying to not ignore the little child, but I messed around and closed the door, and her hair got caught in the door, and Mark started driving off. And I'm saying, Mark, the child's hair is tangled up in the door. And it made me feel so bad. And I said, Mark, I gotta do something. I gotta do something for these children. I said, can we do a borderline project? at that time, I thought it all the way out. I wanted to take some of the cloth, like his father had a manufacturing, he made blue jeans, make everything. His father called the Omni, he made clothes. And on the Mexican side is where they sold them and stitched them together and sent them back to the factory for them to put the buttons and everything on one side. So it was two sides. Paso did
Yeah,
the
on the
buttons
border.
and things that the sewn was did on the Mexican side. So he gave us a whole big old truckload of materials. And I said, Mark, I think I would like for the children to do a tie.
Tie?
Let's see how
I
I'm
like-
tying all my cloth.
Right.
I take and tie all of my cloth. I tie it all together like a piece of cloth. Like that right there. You remember that, but Miss
Right. I saw
Virginia.
you working on that on the long drive from Atlanta.
This was all tied up on the way to up here. Y'all can touch that and look at it. Look at how much time I had to do. But practice makes perfect. I do something all the time.
Let me bring you back to this piece here that you did. I know you were talking about the border work that you did, but how is this related to what you did at the border? I mean, I can guess, but I wonder if you could talk about what inspired you to put it together that way.
First time I was fenced in, think about the baby. Mm-hmm. These are baby shoes. Them children been fenced in before. But now that they are fenced in, they are fenced in. Me and somebody in the audience was talking about the first time somebody fenced you in. Might have put you in your cradle, then you. Mm-hmm. That was a fence around you. And we have heard, Lord, build a fence all around me to protect me each and every day. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, how do we equate things with the way that we're being treated? How do we see ourselves as an example during that treatment? How can we see ourselves as a sacrifice? Somebody have to tell you, Momo told me, she said, I hate that you had to go through what you had to go through, but sometimes the Lord will use you like a lamb. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Me going through Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children, I look back at that now as a thing of me being in the box.
I see. Well, we should talk about the Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children, but I wonder if you want to play, I mean, we've been talking for a little while. Is there anything that any seeds planted that you want to work with and doing something
I'll
with
give
song?
them a piece. I'll give them a piece of the whole thing is, let's see what we can come up with. I was thinking about here we are on the timeline. Here we are. Moving on. The main thing about the timeline is to remember where you've been. See, there's been so much history that has been left behind. I thought about when the timeline, if it was a baby, and start growing on. And everybody that came along and been born, was a part of the timeline history. I would look back to see what had been brought along. What had been brought along. I would probably tell every man, woman, boy, and girl. For one thing, I'll say, hey, yeah, this is your world. This is your world. Let's help it turn. Let's help it turn on and on and on and on and on. This is your world. Every man, woman, boy, and girl, soon as you born, something special start going on the timeline.
Thank you, Lonnie. So we've just been talking, and you pulled together these bits of the conversation and turned it into a song. This is what you do. You've made a couple records, and when people ask you to play one of the songs from your records, what do you tell them?
I've already played that. I already done sung that.
So everything is original. It just comes to you every time.
I probably could sing it again, but I can't sing it like it was.
Yeah.
I couldn't, so I don't force myself to do that. I think if there is something that could be enhanced it by me singing it again, I could think about Caged In and sing about Caged In. I could think about this being part of the timeline, that being part of the timeline, every painting in here being part of the timeline. I can actually, what I've just done, the piece I just done, I had to go deep in my emotions to get it. So it's like the well of thought that I've fall into. It's an ocean of thought. So I'm gathering all this thought and I'm bringing it to the point that we need to hear something about right now. And that's what I try to bring, is what we need now. And it may not be to make you rock or roll or make you jump or shout. There's other artists that can give you that kind of entertainment. I think I am doing what my grandmother and my mother wanted me to do. I'm ministering in my own way, but it's with my art.
I've actually heard you do a couple rock and roll and numbers, so I know often when you're with a full band, a whole different well comes out. And I want to talk about that well of emotion a little, because you mentioned the Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children, which is a place you spent a significant amount of time. Just to let people who are in the audience know, Lonnie was swept up as a vagrant child when he was out looking for your mother.
Yes.
Right? He had, his mother had, well, he had been, I guess, kidnapped, snatched away from your mom, from one of these people who were supposedly helping her out. I'm sorry to condense this, but it's a long
It's
story.
fine.
And traded in the story that Lonnie got for a bottle of whiskey at a whiskey house, and grew up for, when you were very young, sweeping up and cleaning up at the whiskey house, and out looking for your mother because you thought that she must be somewhere close. And you got swept up and brought to what is called the Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children at the time at Mount Meigs.
Well, Bull Connor had ordered all the children off the street because at that time, it was shortly before the three little girls got bombed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. But in the 50s, really the activities of the civil rights marchers and all of those other things was going on. The news from Montgomery and all of that, the Selma, the Montgomery March and all of that other stuff was going on, and Bull Connor wasn't going to allow that to take place in Birmingham. And a couple of the churches where Dr. King was meeting, one of them was at Reverend Shuttlesworth Church, and one of them was at the 16th Street Baptist Church there in downtown Birmingham. And a lot of the meeting places was in three churches in uptown, downtown Birmingham. And so what happened with me at 11 years old, I had no idea about being out, what a curfew even meant. All I knew that I was doing my normal thing. Mr. McElroy would tell me to get my ass out the house and go dig worms. And then sometime I would take my worm bucket and my little fork that I had made and go dig worms up and down the ditch, and then go about 2 blocks down the ditch, and then it ran into the creek. And the creek take you all the way across town. I was trying to find my mother, so I was going further and further up the creek each time I left the house. So what happened, where I got to a parent that evening, and Mr. McElroy had told me early that morning to go dig worms, and I had stayed out, but every day I would get to a parent just before night or too late, because mostly everybody started coming to our house to get a shot of whiskey and beer and wine, and put money in the rock holder. As long as I'm back about 11 o'clock and up in my I had me a little shack built on top of the house because of the drive-in theater right across the ditch. And I can lay back and look at the drive-in. I was in between two speakers. Very early I had establish my stereo system. I was a smart little cat. For real, I was. So.
But that's actually, it's interesting to think about when hearing your music, that some of the earliest music that you heard was like the stuff on the Rockola, the jukebox in these kind of dance halls that you were cleaning up in. The McElroys were a kind of, I guess, foster family, and a man who treated you very, very cruelly. And the drive-in theater.
Drive-in theater.
So this is some of the first music that you heard.
The state fairground, because I stayed with this lady. She was a burlesque dancer, and that's where she brought me from the fairground to Miss McElroy and them house late at night, and asked Miss McElroy to give her a pint of whiskey. And it was said, but I don't know nothing, because I really don't know.
You couldn't fact check it at 4 years old.
I couldn't fact check it and see, did she try to sell me for a pint of whiskey, or did she ask Miss McElroy to keep me and give her a pint of whiskey because she needed some whiskey. So Miss McElroy took me away from her because Miss McElroy said I was malnourished and I was real, real skinny, and she just didn't want to see me being drugged around with this woman from city to city with the carnival. So Miss McElroy took me in and told whatever this woman was to get on out the house, because at the time she must have been stumbling drunk, carrying me, and Miss McElroy just took me out of her arms and sit me down, fixed me a plate of food that was 4.5, put me on the floor, gave me a plate of food, and that was the first time something ever seriously happened to me that I don't think I ever forget. This man was trying to take my food off my plate, and I took my food and crawled up underneath the couch, and he was picking at me. He was drunk. And then he grabbed my plate, and I was trying to get my plate from him, and he ran to the red hot stove and got the red poker iron out from it now, and he was poking that and jugged me right there in the head. And she said I started screaming and hollering, and when they pulled me out, the poker iron was stuck in my brain. They had to rush me to the hospital. So these incidents that actually affected me were the ones that I think somewhere down the line, somebody asked me, how could you be forgiving? How could you forgive? How could you work that out? This was the emotional thing that happened to you. For one thing, I never knew the man's name.
Mr. McElroy's real name, you never knew it.
But it wasn't Mr. McElroy that stuck the iron in my head. It was a drunk man that was at Mr. McElroy's house. They never did tell me who the man was. It was the same thing that when I got hit by the car at 7.5 years old, I got hit at Mr. McElroy had whooped me all day because Ms. McElroy had passed away. He said I killed her. I didn't know nothing about killing nobody. And then Mr. McElroy started beating me when he came home from work. He started beating me and said, you don't kill my goddamn wife. And he started whipping me, jerked the ironing cord out of the iron, whooped it and cutting me across the face, all across the back. He took a piece of wood. I ain't got one in here. But he took a piece of wood a little bit bigger than this piece right here. Yes, I do. A lot of times, some things I do, they remind me of what I done been through. He took this here and chucked it at me, throwed it. He throwed it at me, hit me in the back of the head.
So when you say that you make things that sometimes remind you, what do you think? Is it making something that hurt? I mean, I look at that and you've kind of taken a piece of wood and added something to it to make it something else and make it beautiful. Do you think of it like that you're making some beauty
It's
out of this?
almost like the idea would never rot away. I could dress it up. I could put it together where when they go into the museum or go somewhere out when they leave me, somebody get it. I could be done took this and put this piece of catgut or fishing line on it. Like that right there. Tied it on there. Bring it in through there like that. I could take it to another level. So when it leave me, because it was about to make me cry just then. But I could take it to that level. I could take it home with me, and I can always see it and remember it. But in a sense, the spirits say it'll never have to happen to you again. Because you got it. You got it. You got it. You learned your lesson from it. It happened to you as an example. You got it. So by you having it, you could take it and you could hang it up. And somebody else can come along and take a photo of it. And they can see that that happened to you. And they can be very, very careful that it never happened to them. Because you are the example. That he hit you in the back of the head with this. He beat you all day. And then after hitting you with that, he told you to get your ass out and go get some wood. And I filled up every corner. And I took my wagon out from under the house, and I was crying so hard. And I wasn't paying attention. And I just dashed across the street. And when I dashed across the street, the car hit me. And they said the car drove me for 2.5 blocks up underneath the car. I always look at my life as a fortunate life. Because I could have just bounced the wrong way and the car could have bust me all to pieces.
Why do you think it did? Why do you think that? What do you think made your life fortunate? You were talking about the spirit earlier. Is it that?
I think I am an example. I think I am an example of endurance, of what a human brain could do. Our brains are so special. That's all I be singing about. The timeline is all about the human development. This little box, those little children will never forget being fenced in down there. They will never forget it. It's going to go into their children. Can I sing another song?
Yes, please. Sing another song.
No matter where I go, no matter how far I try, if I left the mothership alone, and I fly, If I was invited to go to the moon just to be a worker there, I'll probably find myself a corner and dream about coming back home. No matter how far I go, I remember as a little bitty boy, no matter how far, I always came back home. No matter how much I learn, I still won't be done learn enough for all I need to know. No matter how far I go. I was looking at possibility. I told my children, I said, children, that brain you have, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you scratch it, it'll carry you a long way. No matter how far I go, I'll still search to get back home. If you see me crying along the way, if you see me trying, trying to be an example, no matter how far I go. I remember singing this song. In America, I'm just a suspect. Everywhere I go, somebody's watching me. Somebody's hearing what I have to say. I'm just a suspect until the day I die, and then I become a dust speck. Oh, a dust speck. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like all of us humans is destined to be high. No matter where I go. Then I remember this song here. If I build myself some steps to heaven, construct them of many material things. And when I get to heaven, and God offer me wings, I'll say, God, take back these wings, because I must return. Somebody needs me. Take back these wings. So many times, maybe I've asked God to take the wings back, and that's what spared my life.
Lonnie, you just talking about being a suspect, and because I know a little bit or a fair bit now about the Alabama Industrial School for Negro Children, I know that a lot of people who went through that, which was essentially a slave camp, the children there were loaned out to tend the fields of the surrounding farmers, many of them on the board. It's a terrible story, and there was a federal investigation about it, and ultimately somebody was on death row. It was found that he grew up at Mount Meigs for many years and was sentenced to death, and his lawyers on appeal went through and looked at how he was treated there and found 27 other prisoners on death row or in prison for life who had also been there, and told very similar stories about what had happened to them as children at Mount Meigs. And it is abysmal, the way they were fed, beaten, raped, treated. Lonnie himself has done artworks about the beatings that he took. But you are not there. You're not in prison. You're an artist and now in a place. You've traveled all over the world, now sitting here in the home of a great artist. So what does it mean now that people like Mr. Mitchell recognize your work and get something from it, see something of beauty that makes them, plants a seed for them?
My grandmama tried to do all she could to turn me around. My mama did all she could to turn me around. They knew that who I were, that all was not supposed to happen.
This is after you got out?
That's after I got out of the Alabama Industrial School, because they didn't know where I was.
Right, that you were lost to them.
I was a lost child to them. I'm Lonnie Bradley Holley. My father was Bradley. My grandfather was Holley. I come from a people, a working people. I come from a surviving people. My grandmama dug graves. She went to the city lot every morning, the city lot where all the dump trucks and stuff. This is where I learned to do all of these things. I learned to, ain't nothing that I would not do to keep from being an example. There is no landfill that could hold me down, because I know what it contains. My thing is, if I cannot be a way of telling people, just as sure as you bury that stuff, there is going to find an escape. If there is a certain amount of water that ever fills up a crevice that you got a hole in the ground, and that water starts flushing out somewhere, that water gonna keep cutting and cutting. It's just like the roots that I got hanging up. I got roots hanging here. If these roots get in the ground, they start growing, and you think about the big old trees that's out here on this island. Them roots will pop any kind of piping that you lay down. Just squeeze them, crush them. In a 20-year period, you might as well put a whole new sewage system in, because the roots be done crushed the sewage system that you initially put in. I just be trying to tell the truth. The foundation of a house is not the same in a 20-year period because of the roots that grows. Somebody said, well, we got a wall that's cracking. Yes, you got a wall that's cracking, you got a root growing up underneath it. My thing is, have you been there with me to understand what I'm trying to tell you? Somebody said, will you be willing to give all you got and come go with me? That means you got to take off all what you got on, all the things that you like to wear and everything. You got to take it all off, and you got to put on the garment. You got to get down to the nitty-gritty. You got to be ready to go. I'll be 71 years old my next birthday, but I can go. And look at my staff that I found. I'm working on it. That's a Lonnie Holley staff right there. I liked it because not only can I walk through them woods out there, but if I see something up high that I want to eat, I can take that and pluck it down. That's an extra arm for me. You understand what I'm saying? If I see something that I need on that right there, I can untie what I got on there and tie it to my staff and keep on trucking. You understand what I'm saying? So when I make something, I try to make something as an example. You say, what kept me from being in the prison on death row? Is that I wasn't cut out for that. I mean, for some reason, Mr. Glover, he bust both of my thighs and busted my head open in the Alabama Industrial School. He whipped me so bad, both of my thighs were bust open. Down my leg here, all that was bloody, beat at me. 150 licks as an example. You understand what I'm saying?
For trying to run away.
For trying to run away. I did run away. They caught me and brought me back. But I was an example. I always looked at myself as an example. That's all I am. I said, okay, Lord, if I'm going to be an example. I said, Mama, if I'm going to be an example, I might as well, like John Lewis say, get into good trouble. Be a good example. Go in the ditch. Go in somebody's garbage. Go in the trash. Go down to the Salvation Army. Go into the flea market. Go into the thrift store. Put my money where it's going to help somebody, but come out of there with something. And when I make it, people, I know he didn't took that $100 drawer and put them old white shoes in there like that. $40-some shoes. Put it all together. It's a work of art that may end up in one day in the Smithsonian, because I already have work in the Smithsonian. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. When my mama gave me the letter that the Lords of London, Mama said, you got a letter from the Lords of London? Mama come to the door, because I think my sister Betty had read it to her and said, Lonnie got a letter from the Lord. I said, what? He got a letter from the Lord, you know what I'm saying? And Grandpa was still living. He said, oh, my Lord. It made me feel funny because, you know, I had got a letter from the Lord of London, but the way it went around the neighborhood, I got a letter from the Lord. I'll never forget that, you know. It made me feel good to see my grandmama and my mama see my art before they died. That was the proudest thing that I said I'll never stop doing. All of my older relatives saw me doing my art. So all the things that people did to me, I made a piece called Blood on the Rock Pile for Mr. Reddy, whooping me.
Mr. Reddy, one of the men at the
beating me.
school.
I did the pieces in Bill's collection. Bill Arnett is Matt's father. I tied up all those rocks. I tied up those emotions. I tied them up. And I dropped them tears. You know, you ain't gonna get away with crying and you got work to do. Drop them up. I wasn't a soldier. I wanted to be a soldier, but I wasn't qualified to be one. My papa had been one, my daddy was one, but I didn't.
I'd say you're fighting another war, a whole different kind.
Hopefully, win.
Lonnie, a great pleasure speaking to you. Do you want to do one more song?
I'll
you
do
feeling
one more
it?
if they don't mind. And I thank you all for coming, ladies and gentlemen, and to the person that's actually doing the video in there, whoever that's here, y'all, thumbs up from other universe to the audience. He kept on moving his camera. I didn't know where he moved it to. But again, let's see where we go. The last one was on white keys. This one is on black keys. I think every little child now wants somebody to say, I'm proud of you. I think, doing the best that we can do. We can say we did the best we can. My thing is we are moving so fast into the digital. Da 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 to the data degree. There's so much information in the iCloud for someone to do research on. Even high in the sky, they'll be drawn droning on. Automatic pilots flying planes in the air and probes proving on far, 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 far out into space. Da 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 da. It's gonna be a big part of the human race. I remember when I was a little boy, they say humans will grow weaker. They'll grow weaker, but oh, so intelligent. Oh, a baby know more about that now than grandmother and grandfather ever did. Da 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 da. I said now, cold to the mama, cold to the mama. That means computer technology management. Your CTM. Cold to the mama is your mama now. Da 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 da. We all want daddy. Sooner or later, it's gonna be about how much data you have. How much you got on the line? How many Instagram shots you had? How many tweets you got on Twitter? Da 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 da. But I did this song called No Matter How Much Data You can't wear but one pair of shoes in your grave.
Thank you, Lonnie, very much. Thank you to the Elaine de Kooning House. Any questions from the audience? our sparsely socially distanced masked audience, by the way. Hi.
May I ask about the way you paint on the quilts? When did that start, and is it something about the texture? Because you obviously paint on canvas and on quilts. So anything you would like to say about the quilts, I would be very
The quilt,
interested to hear.
excuse me, didn't mean to cut you off. This is my first experience painting on the quilts. This way, I've painted on some pieces of cloth, not so much like this right here, because this process was gessoed, and then we laid a white layer on them, and then you got your colors on there. It's a different feel, but it also is a respect to, for me, is a respect to the handworks that has done the quilts. My thing for fabric, the explorers of fabrics are those that would investigate the meaning of doing such a thing, is going to probably wonder, why did I choose the quilts to work on? But a quilt itself has so much meaning already embedded within it. So a lot of times from patch to patch, and then if you look at the coloration that I laid on top of a lot of my quilts, that I, especially this piece right there, I think you can almost see through it, and you can actually see the quilt bursting through the colors that I applied on that one. And this one here, the crown itself, I call it the crown, but I just was guided by the colors, and I thought about all them women and how they must have been making quilts in Africa. And it just came, something came with them. It's in their DNA. You see what I'm talking about? So now I had it, and I worked with it, and that mama's eye, that one eye, this is one that they use, that one eye in this one over here. I didn't want to put no more eyes in that one, or the one, our eyes together, all the eyes on this one together. The thing about quilts is a lot of times, a lot of people work together on those quilts, or a lot of meaning that's in one quilt came from a lot of sources of the wearers of the materials that was embedded in the quilt. So I just love working with them now that I've done it. I think I told Matt I would like to get back to Atlanta and we make a couple more boards and see what I can do with that. But it was a what one would say, a trial period for me. And I think, it's up to Virginia and Matt, and where did she go? Catherine, right? Yeah. She came in and she looked at them, and I mostly look at people look at my work. And I felt good about how she felt about them. And every day, Virginia would come down and take a look and go back upstairs and give me a thumbs up because I'm doing good. And even with the boards, I know you didn't ask me nothing about the boards, but the boards, this is the first time I've worked these kind of boards. And no lie to you, I worked 10, I worked my own fabricated ways of just found objects or whatever. You know, imagine since 1979 up until now, I had an environment with thousands and thousands of people, not pieces, people, but pieces in it that just got bulldozed under. And I had all kinds of works on boards and everything. I think one of the first pieces was colorful like that one there that Matt's father got for me back in 1986 when he first met me. And it was called When Mother Earth Gets Up. When the earth get tired, she gonna get up. Volcanoes and stars gonna start erupting. It was a strong, heavy piece just like that. And but it was a meaningful piece. Some things in the archives, if you all looked back at some of my works, it's powerful. Someone else?
Do you think by any chance that your paintings look like your music and your music sounds like your art? Like there seems like to me there's this powerful gentleness. It's very forceful, but it's extremely gentle at the same time. Do you think of them as being like each other in some way, or there being a conversation between the two of them?
If I could explain what I had to do for a year and a half on a rock pile, and every rock that I crawled for about 3 months had my blood on it. And I started seeing different shapes. I started seeing beautiful things in the rocks. Everything I picked up, I saw something in it. And that's the way it is with children right now. If I had a class, if you all was my class, and you told me, and I told you, I'm gonna put this up here, but I'm gonna guide you through this because I want you all to feel this, because it's a bent piece of wire. Throw it down, it means nothing to nobody. But for me, it became a way. I don't know whether a lot of you all in here is old enough to know this term. Where there's a will, there is a way. So the will is in you. See all these clothespins I got on me? They're a will. Because I can use them anytime I got ready. See what I'm talking about? But if I hang them on me and I go down the street and somebody, ooh, he got them things. He should be ashamed of himself. He got them things hanging on him. You understand? But I know what I can do with them. So long as I can stay focused on what I can do with them, let me show you something now. You see this here? That's beautiful to me already. I don't have to do nothing to it. But I can do something to it. I can straighten it out. I can bend it. I can straighten it out. I can bend it. I can straighten it out. I can bend it. And by the time I get through bending it, and I turn this around like that, and then I put that little whop just like that, put that just like that, and then I do it like that right there, and I show it to the children, and I said, this is what I've done. Then I can reach back here and I can give it some hair. Take a minute, because everything takes time. We rush to do things and we need to slow down. Take time and make sure that it's locked in place. I can reach back here. Because everything that we need is around and about us. And I ain't got to use it all at one time.
So I'm waiting for this to come back around to your music and your art somehow.
Coming back around to the music and the art
The question.
is also coming back around to the little boy going down the ditch, digging worms, moving stuff out the way in order to find the worms. So now I'm finding things to go together.
Full
Also
circle.
going back to the little boy, bringing this wood in where there be enough of wood to keep us warm. Also taking and evidencing that there is enough thread or enough ideas in my head that I can sew a quilt together. Can you dig where I'm coming from? Can you dig it? This thing is more than just a reach over here, because you got a bunch of these here. People don't even know that. Y'all, could anybody guess what this was? Nomad. Huh? A mop. Give her a hand, everybody. Yeah, that's what it was. It was a mop. But to me, look here, watch this here. One screen. Because in one screen of that mop, you're going to find one screen, two screens, three screens, and then you're going to unravel it because this is cotton. This is going to show you how some machine took the cotton out of the cotton field and put it all together. Can you dig where I'm coming from? You see? But when I put it in here, I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to remember the cotton field that I worked in, picking the cotton. I'm going to remember all of that. It ain't going nowhere. It's in my brain. It ain't going to never cease to be. But do I let it worry me, or do I take advantage of it? I take advantage of it. One beautiful screen off of that mop. And then I got 11 dozen other screens. You see what I'm talking about? To give to every child. I bought this here. It ain't never been in a bucket mopping no floor. I bought it just because I take it to the schools and take it and do something just like this with it. You see? So these are the things that I demonstrate with. And the other things, I can't go back and get everything, but this right here, if you all look into some of my paintings, y'all see these bushes in them. See the bushes? You can see them, and I got the roots. I take them and lay this down on my paint and spray it. You see what I'm talking about? So waste not, want not. And then when I get through with this here, this gonna end up into a work of art itself. You see what I'm saying? Waste not, want not. I learned all of that. Well, a lot of times it was beat into you if you wasted any of those people's stuff. You ended up getting a whooping about it, so you learned your lesson. Yes, ma'am. Anybody else wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to thank you. And first, let me thank everybody for coming tonight. Since you mentioned data, Lonnie Holley does have a new record coming out in 3 months, in a couple months? I don't know. I'm sorry. I may not have it right. This is airing in the end of November with Matthew White, called Broken Mirror, a Selfie Reflection. I would highly recommend following Lonnie Holley Universe on Instagram. It's Holly with an EY, Universe on Instagram, and looking up Lonnie Holley online. Again, thanks to the extraordinary people, Chris and Catherine at the de Kooning House, and all of you for being here tonight. And Lonnie, I am so grateful every time I talk to you, but just so impressed with how easily you can share the joy and the pain. And I think I hear it in your music and I see it in your work. And I am so grateful for you sharing it with us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and thumbs up for Mother Universe.